Sam, thank you very, very much. And when I saw Sam in his tuxedo, I thought I didn't get the memo. You know, I've been asked to just say a few words, and I'll be brief, and I really learned my lesson recently. I chair a number of working groups on Capitol Hill, and the Lyme Disease Caucus, which I head, asked me to speak at their annual convention, and they said, you got an hour. So I took an hour and 5 minutes, got into the weeds about that very debilitating disease, and at the end of it, this little girl, a 4-year-old, came running up, and she said to me, "Mister, your speech was long and boring." So I looked at her, she spun around and walked away. A few minutes later, her father came up and he said, "I just want you to know, I saw you talking to my little daughter, Melissa, that she just repeats whatever she hears." So I think I've been forever chastened by that one. I want to, first of all, let me just say a word about Don Payne, my good friend who sadly passed away. We worked together on issues of humanitarian interest, combating war and disease and famine, and of course, trying to assist refugees wherever and whenever we found them. He is so missed. He was a one-of-a-kind individual, knew so much about Africa, and recently in the House chamber just outside of it in Statuary Hall, member after member took to the podium as they did at his funeral and on the House floor to remember what an extraordinary man he was. So thank you, Refugees International, for recognizing his tremendous contributions to the displaced and to all those who are suffering around the world. So thank you. I do want to thank Refugees International for your extraordinary efforts and advocacy on behalf of internally displaced refugees and stateless persons. And stateless persons are often among the most forgotten of all. Remember the Roma and so many others throughout the world who people just look right through and forget. You don't forget them. And of course, all are vulnerable to exploitation, disease, disability, and death. It has been a privilege to work with you on so many initiatives and campaigns in the past. And with 27 million IDPs and almost 16 million refugees, your work, our work, is far from done. You know, I ran into Eric Schwartz coming in, and I know I think maybe tomorrow, may even join you on your board. But Eric Schwartz, I'll never forget, back in the 1990s, when it became very clear that as the comprehensive plan of action was closing and ending, there were about 40,000 Vietnamese boat people still languishing in refugee camps all over the world. And the thought was forcibly return these individuals, that somehow they were not true refugees, even though the process done to interview them was egregiously flawed. I convened 4 hearings, worked hand in glove with Eric and others, including people from, obviously, Refugees International, who testified and made strong advocacy on behalf of those left behind. And I even offered an amendment on the floor to prevent U.S. funding from funding that kind of forced repatriation. We won it. That led to Rover, and that led to some 20,000 Vietnamese coming to the United States who now live here and build their families and their jobs here. Refugees International played a critical part in that fight. When some of you may know this, but I'm the author of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, and that was no easy lift getting that legislation passed. It had real opposition, and we faced an enormous amount of indifference. But one of the hardest parts of that bill was the creation of the new T visa to provide asylum for women and for their extended families and men who have been trafficked into the United States. In the past, we used to put them on the next plane, and they were re-trafficked and re-exploited as a result of it. That was a very hard lift. Refugees International helped enormously to convince Congress that the T visa was vitally needed, and it is now the law of the land. In southern Sudan, everyone knows about Darfur, obviously a horrible genocide. But few people knew about the 2 million who died, the 4 million who were displaced as Bashir and Khartoum invaded southern Sudan. But not Refugee International. Not only knowledgeable, but had people on the ground bringing back information so that that information became highly actionable and held all of us in Congress, executive branch, UNHCR, UNICEF, everyone else, the international community, accountable for what was not being done to assist those displaced and those who were suffering. The same thing goes for Rwanda. I'll never forget. I've chaired many hearings on refugees, but back on December 4th, 1996, Lionel Rosenblatt, just like it said on your video, you don't care who you have to criticize, you want to get the job done. Well, Lionel Rosenblatt testified about the refugees, some from Rwanda, and of course the many thousands in eastern Zaire, now DR Congo again. And he said, the first key is access, and then he went on and said, I was not satisfied with the administration's response that we just heard, and went on to, point for point out why he and the people who are on the ground from Refugees International were advocating for those who were disappearing into the bush, and the international community seemed to be just fine with that. You've done it on all these different countries over the years. A couple weeks ago, I chaired a hearing on the sending back of North Korean refugees, refoulement, from China to North Korea. And when I see Michel now at the helm of Refugees International, he was a tiger fighting all the time, because we worked very closely on issues with regards to refugees with the UNHCR. And here we have a situation where thousands of North Koreans have been sent back to execution or the gulags. And again, Refugees International is there every time. So I want to thank you. You have saved lives. You have prevented further catastrophic happenings that would have happened if you were not there. And you have been aggressive. You have been very vigilant, ever compassionate. And many of your people, like Queen Noor, great supporter of Refugees International, what she has done on the forensics issue and having an accounting for those who die from mass atrocities. Queen Noor testified at a hearing of ours just recently, and I and others were spellbound by her knowledge of those issues. Such is the complexion of this organization. So I want to thank you. In this organization, you welcome the stranger, and God bless you.